Welcome to Wrestling with Goals, the Conceive, Believe, and Achieve podcast,
where we delve into the minds of elite athletes and coaches to uncover their secrets behind their success. I'm your host, Sean Garris, former university wrestling coach, D1 wrestler, national champion, Olympic trials medalist, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, three-time world team coach in grappling, and author. Join me as we explore the realms of training, mindset, goal setting, overcoming adversity, and various coaching methodologies in the world of sports. Get ready to be inspired and motivated as we learn from the best in the game on our journey to achieving greatness.
This is part 2 of a 2-part series. Hope you enjoy.
Do you have any stories about some of the athletes that you may have affected, some feel-good stories, or whatever, stories that you may have changed somebody's life in a way?
Yeah, so I think right around that time I started coaching at University of Guelph. I also took a job at a school called the Hill Academy that was just starting out, and it was, I actually ended up getting into teachers college, kind of just to backpedal a little bit while I was coaching. I got in teachers college in the U.S. and I ended up taking a course with the girlfriend at the time, who's now the wife of this family. His name was Patrick Merrill, and another brother named Brody Merrill. Huge, kind of the first family of lacrosse, from a professional standpoint, and they were starting this sports academy, this kind of prep school model, which didn't exist in Canada now. Now it's kind of popped up all over the place, but they were the first to do it. And, they approached me about, because of my background and my passion for coaching and developing young people, they, thought I'd be a perfect fit there. And so ended up taking a job there. And I taught, every different class. They didn't have a ton of money at the time, so I was teaching French. I can't speak French. I was teaching geography and history and phys ed and basically whatever I could do. I was also living in the dorms as well and driving the bus. And that said, I loved every minute of it. I loved the family I was working for, and it just felt like, similar to when I was playing, it felt like I was doing what I was designed to do. I was surrounded by young people that wanted to get better. I was involved in sports, and I was using my ability to relate with people. And so I ended up this is actually how I got into strength conditioning. The strength coach there quit in October, and I was given the opportunity to fill that role in that time. And because, again, I was always someone that trained, but I wasn't, strength coaching was never ever on my list of things that I thought I would do as a profession. But at the time, it seemed like a cool thing to do once I wasn't doing it, right? Like, you go in there, and again, I was a big fan actually of Ultimate Fighter at the time when it first was coming out. I was like, I'm just going to run this. Like, these guys run hills and wrestle, and I was doing all this crazy shit in the gym. I had no idea, right? But I would, watch the Ultimate Fighter, and I'm like, I'm going to do this in the gym tomorrow. It was probably really dangerous, to be honest, at the time. But, that was a part of my journey in sports. But, again, I was really good communicator. I was really good at building buy-in. Just didn't have that knowledge yet. But I knew I was on to something, and so it sparked a learning journey that took me to obviously to where I am today. But when I was there, we took this student on by the name of Jameson Coleman, who joined the school halfway through the school year, and again, my school experience was a rough one, and I struggled and didn't have a lot of people believed in me. And so when I sat on his admissions interview with his mom, his story really resonated strongly with me. And I remember our principal at the time and our guidance counselor, who were sat in the meeting, they looked at him like, we're all making cross eyes. This is a no-go, stay away from this kid. His parents had just gone through a difficult divorce. He was getting himself into trouble, at that time. You could see that his knuckles were bloody, and I mean, who knows what happened, or how that happened or what it was. But he was an angry kid, didn't talk much, and he was going into grade 10 at the time. And, his parents and his mom basically, begged us at the time, like, he needs this experience. He's just an angry kid and needs an opportunity. He actually wasn't even playing lacrosse at that time. He was a good player at a young age, but gotten out of sports and just hadn't been hanging around the right people. So I really advocated for him. I said, let me take this kid in our dorm rooms. I'll take him under my, I'll be accountable for him. And, the first weekend, I was like, I may have made a terrible decision here. As I wasn't sure what I got myself into. It was literally like for a week, he wouldn't say a word. And he just looked like he was going to either kill somebody or ready to snap or take off and disappear, and it just was that, just had that uncomfortableness to his spirit and just unsettled, and you could just see the anger inside him. And but the one thing that I did see was that when he came to the gym, and like, similar to me when I started playing football, like became his world, right? Like where it's like, his personality came alive. Still didn't say much, but like he, would get under a bar and go into sprints or push a sled. It was just like there was just stuff that he needed to work through and get off his chest, and he wasn't ready to talk about that stuff. But it was like, he felt like, and again, he was a little behind in terms of his skill as a lacrosse player. That's the sport he played at that time. And but for him, the gym was kind of a place where he could be the man. He was stronger than everybody else, and he enjoyed it, and he would stay after. He actually would, I remember, so we would take a bus to the gym at the time. We worked there at a community center, and we would work out, and then we'd get on the bus to go home, and he would stay and work out longer and then jog home. And he had these Timberland boots that he would run in. It was the most ridiculous thing in the world. And then we'd be driving, and I'd see this guy in my rearview mirror just running with these stupid Timberland boots on and huge jogging pants. And, anyways, it was like it became his thing. But then the funny part was more of our kids would stay behind and work out longer. And, I was going home on a bus with nobody. And then this is the kind of impact this kid started having on people. And so eventually he would come out of his shell, started becoming better at lacrosse, and him and I really connected and started, having a really strong, meaningful relationship. And, he actually, when he selected his number to wear for the upcoming lacrosse season, he chose to wear my former football number. And, that was something that I didn't take lightly, and it just meant a lot to me. It still does to this day.
That's pretty cool.
So he went on to, and it was funny because I taught this one class, it was food nutrition, and it was my only kid in the class. So basically we just made brownies together and ate food all day, and it was like this ridiculous, and again, I was 27 at the time. Yeah. Probably the maturity of a 16-year-old, right? So we hit it off a lot more than probably, it was, again, we'd cook chicken wings, and it was just an opportunity for us to eat food during the middle of the school day, right? So, so I had been dating the girl I was dating at the time, who's now my wife. She was one of the first people I told that I was going to propose to my wife, and I had an opportunity. The team I played for in Italy had invited me back to, and this is a story at a lot of different levels, so I'll try to keep it short. Anyways, he was one of the first people I told that I was going to propose to my wife, and we had actually been invited back to Italy to play in a game. They were, and they'd signed me to a short-term contract, and so they were going to fly us back over there. And he was going on his, first lacrosse road trip, and they had so they would train all fall and winter, and then in the spring they would go on this big travel trip with lots of showcases, and the idea, the hopes of getting exposure to some of the top programs in the U.S. and hopefully maybe get a scholarship. And that's something that the Hill has become really known for and has established themselves as probably the top lacrosse program in the world for at the prep level. But, so he had gone that way, and it was kind of this cool moment where it was like I was going to go get engaged, and he was going to go play, his kind of first lacrosse, showcase experience. And he'd worked so hard to get back, and he'd brought his marks up from failing average when he came in to, being in the high 80s. And it was just such a cool moment. I remember, and again, there's the sense of pride and joy we had for each other along that journey of and again, it was a part of where I talked about with my dad and my own son of just looking at myself a little bit of, and being there for him the same way the teachers in my life had been there for me. And so he went on to do that. I went over, so he had a great tournament. When he came back from that, he got invited to play in this Toronto Beaches, another showcase weekend, and I was still away at the time. I actually haven't told the story in a little while, so I want to get the timeline right. But, so I was still away when he had come back to play for the Toronto Beaches. And he actually suffered an injury when he was playing that game. He got hit in the open field, and it was a violent hit, and it was clean, but it was a violent hit. And actually, he suffered a life-ending injury in that minute, in that game, and the hit caused him to sever his brainstem, and he essentially died on the field. They kind of took him back and put him on life support for a little bit. But I was overseas, and I had just gotten married and was there for a week and kind of on this high. And I'll never forget this call I got from the owner of the school at the time. Who was, again, he's like a brother to me, Patrick, and calling me and telling me that Jameson had passed away. And it was like this thing. I was like, what are you talking about? Like this. It's like one of those first things that, like, people get, I don't know, they get into car accidents, they get into, people get sick and die, but, like, people aren't supposed to die in sports, right? Like, this is supposed to be, like this safe space, right? Like, this is supposed to be, like, and that shook me and broke me in a way that I'd never, felt before. And when I came back and, telling a bunch of 15-year-olds to sit down and talk about what it means to grieve and death, and and I didn't have answers for myself, and trying to make sense of something that didn't work. But the one thing that just gave me this sense of purpose of, like, this kid lived, and I said this to his parents, and he lived this full life, within this 16-year period, right? Like, he had his comeback story, and man, it would have been incredible to watch what he could have gone on to do. But, like, the impact that this guy had on this school and this community of, like, and we were like a group of 25 people, including staff, and all of us were, like, shook to our core by this kid, and every one of us had our own story of how he was there and showed up for us, or pushed us to do something in the gym, or encouraged us in a conversation at nighttime before we went to bed. And, like, he was just the ultimate glue guy, right? Like, he was the ultimate teammate. And so the group of kids that were there with us at that time, we all kind of had that agreement that we're not going to let his memory be in vain. And all those kids chose to go on to wherever they went on to play, chose to wear his number. And we had a really talented group of kids there that all went on to play, mostly went on to play Division I college lacrosse, and all of them were 45. And it was weird, 45 wasn't a big number in lacrosse at the time. And one of them actually went on to, most of them went on to be All-Americans and captains, and a couple years later, one of them went on to win a national championship, all wearing this number 45. And all of a sudden, now you look at, it's been pretty crazy. So you look at the NCAA, you'll see, like, 45s on every single team. It's usually the best player on the team wearing that number. And it's all in memory. Like, everyone knows who Jameson Coleman is because of this small group of kids that went on to, honor his memory. And they'll tell you what it means to wear that. And the Hill Academy still has, they give out the practice jersey 45 after every practice. And it's just crazy to me how just a young man's life have gone on to impact so many other people, and, like, adults and young people, and now thousands of people he's never met before. And that's the reason why I stayed in coaching and teaching. Like, I probably wasn't, like, if you had asked me when I first started working at the Hill, I had planned to go, I wanted to coach football, I wanted to go into university full-time coaching. But I think when and it's probably similar to what you do in terms of the police force and your role within that, is that you can just see my impact was greater here right now, and that I can be there for people that need someone. And I was able to play a role in Jameson's life of just, and again, it wasn't about me. Like, Jameson did the work, and I'll never take an ounce of credit for anything he did, but I was just able to be there for him and give him time. And that's why I always come back to that piece around kids need time. And I was able to kind of give him an incubator period where he could go on to fix his relationship with his parents and become that kid, like, that his parents were so proud of. And before he passed away, and I don't know, I guess that's the piece for me. And, like, I look at that where everyone's like, why do you put so much time into these kids that don't seem to appreciate it? And because I'm like, I just think I'm like, maybe one of these kids is going to have that story, and that comeback story, and they go on to do something great and impact thousands of people, and again, obviously, hopefully they don't have that tragic ending, but at the same time, I just think there's such a need to be there for the kids that aren't. Everyone wants the superstars. Everyone wants the polished kid, or the kid that, I'm fortunate to work with some of the best hockey players in the world, and to be honest, at times, they probably could train themselves. They've got this genetic gift and the way they see, and obviously, I believe in what I do, but I always say measure yourself on the average kid, right? Mm-hmm. Measure yourself on your lowest common denominator, and that's how you measure your impact as a professional, as a coach. Mm-hmm. Is what do you do with the kid that no one wanted? What do you do with the kid that no team wanted? Mm-hmm. And there's a big part of me, I was always the kid that no one wanted around, and so when I see those kids that are have that brokenness to them, I'm drawn to it, and it takes a lot out of me, and it's there's far more failure stories than there is, success stories, as I'm sure. But at the same time, I wouldn't trade any of that underdog, those underdog stories of that time, or those conversations with those guys, or, going to pick kids up that, are in trouble, or meeting them where they are, for anything in the world. I think that's just what I'm here on this earth to do, is to be here for the kids that aren't wanted or don't feel like they have value, and to show them the value that they do have.
I love that. As you were talking, I was thinking that you're showing them value in themselves.
Yeah.
Right. And that's such an important thing. Even you hit on it. Some of the kids that are living in the neighborhoods that we're dealing with, they don't see the value in themselves. They don't have anybody to tell them they have value. So they go to other places and try to look for that value. To have a role model, to have somebody in there to believe them. And again, some of their behavior repels people from them. So they don't want it even. So, some teachers don't even want to go near those individuals. So good on you for going near those kids and like you said, finding that one person and developing a relationship, even if it is just cooking brownies.
Yeah.
Right? That's all you have to do to make the kid smile and show him value in himself.
Yeah.
I love that story. Thank you so much for sharing that. I wanted to transition to sports, back to sports. And again, we were, but more so about the development of strength training and how it came about, because I know, for me, this journey is always about weightlifting, and about, I'm a wrestler. Okay, well, you know what? You want to do better. You want to get stronger. We're going to lift. And I always thought it just transferred. It just transferred. And then it wasn't until I started seeing, some of the kids at the swim club that I was part of, they were going in to do the dryland training, and nothing was transferred. And then I started to ask questions, and I talked to Jim Richardson, who was the University of Michigan's coach, and he'd said, well, I was unhappy with ours because nothing was transferring, basically. And he said, I went to Vern Gambetta. Boom, you listen to him. And then he starts talking about, how, I think his one quote that I picked up from on one of his YouTube things was, what happens in the gym stays in the gym. And basically he's doing the Vegas kind of thing. When did you have that realization when, hey, this shit's not working for me?
Yeah.
We interrupt this program to bring you an important announcement.
Looking for top-tier healthcare in the GTA? Look no further than the Core Optimum Health Center. Founded by Dr. Pat Graham, official chiropractor for the Toronto Blue Jays, their clinic offers a wide range of services, including physiotherapy, chiropractic care, acupuncture, massage therapy, naturopath, and more, all in a caring professional environment. They also are proud partners with the Shift Concussion Management Program, offering the latest concussion care and online neurocognitive impact testing at their Mississauga location. At the Core, your health is their priority. Visit the Core Optimum Health Center today and experience industry-leading care.
Well, I think, again, in those first couple of years of the Hill, when I'm watching guys walk out of the gym holding their backs and they can't walk, and I was like, okay, so if they're walking into the gym and they feel like this, and then they got to go play their sport, how is what I'm doing right now making them better, right? I'm making them sore. I'm making them tired. And yes, we were making them stronger, but I'm like, do they feel better? Do they feel more ready to play? And those are questions I started asking. And, I had a coach that was my strength coach at the University of Guelph, guy by the name of Chris Mumford, who was my first role model, kind of mentor in that role, where he invited me in to say, hey, like, Nobes, if you really want to do this, I'll take you under my wing. And he was my first, kind of checkpoint, whereas like I would show up at his house once a week and we'd sit there and it was like university. I was like going back to school. As I said, I didn't graduate with kinesiology. I didn't take the sciences. Like, I was there for 7 years, but it wasn't doing maybe the right stuff at the time. But so he was very big on these functional movements of, multiplanars, like what you train in what we call the sagittal plane in strength and control, which means just forward and backwards, is like, well, most sports are played, moving laterally or moving rotationally. Mm-hmm. But why are we not training in those planes, right? Most ACL and hamstring strains and soft tissue injuries happen when in change of direction. So how am I changing that? I'm like, well, none of my training reflects any of this, So he ended up connecting me with Vern, and Vern invited me to his conference, and I applied. Vern's conference is by kind of acceptance only, and I applied to this course, and not sure how it got accepted, but I was lucky enough to get accepted, and that's where I was kind of went there, spent a week of learning with some of the brightest minds I think to be in sports performance, and it just kind of blew my mind that there was like no bench press, no big heavy squats, no like gasser type conditioning. It was all about like transfer and like, so how do we train this, and how does this equal this, and how do we start to identify the things within our sport that we can actually change? Like, so when I watch the game of hockey, how can I start to identify the things that we can kind of tease out of this that we can get better at in the gym? So maybe it's, instead of saying a heavy bilateral squat or heavy two-legged squat, it becomes, well, hockey is maybe more of a single-leg sport. Simple things of like doing like some type of single-leg training, or lateral lunge, or what type of conditioning is required for hockey, because it's different than MMA, or than it is from track and field. And so what are the types of, how do we train those conditioning? And just watching how Vern works the performance puzzle, to me it's like watching Picasso paint to painting. Like, it's just like beautiful mind. And I ended up going to Vern's house for a few days to kind of spend some, just dive into this with him. I remember sitting in a room with him for 8 hours a day, just with a whiteboard and just watching him. And it's just like, I'm sure you saw this, like, this guy is just brilliant, and it's, and I was like, who was I to think that I could even call myself, performance coach or whatever you want, whatever title you give yourself. And I'm like, I don't know what this guy knows in his pinky finger. And I think that changed, right? And I moved away from, traditional strength training to more of like, exploring of the things that really seemed, again, transfer to the sport, where into things I look for is, one, the best athletes in the world are the most available athletes, mm-hmm. meaning that they stay healthy, mm-hmm. right? So was my training giving them a better shot to, be more resilient to soft tissue injuries, separated shoulders, hip injuries, knee, like structural type injuries, and it was, right? So I started seeing what I was doing. I was like, we were doing all this. Our kids were playing more than anybody else. And and I think in my time at the Hill, I was there for almost 15 years. I think I had one ACL injury and like, maybe a handful of soft tissue injury outside of training thousands of athletes. And I was like, okay, well, there's something to this, right? And like, my athletes were never the biggest, the strongest, or the fastest, but they were the most robust, most adaptable, and most available. And they enjoyed showing up to the gym every day, and they left feeling like after that workout they could go practice. And and that's one of Vern's sayings. He's like, always judge your workout on how your athletes leave that day. Because how they leave that day is how they're going to show up to the next day. Mm-hmm. So if I put them in the ground that day, I need to be prepared to adapt what I'm doing the next day, because there's not going to be much that I can pull from on that following day. So I think just Vern helped me ask really good questions and kind of pointed me, and Vern's very careful at giving you the answers. Mm-hmm. He's kind of like, well, here's the problem, and here's the place where you can kind of go seek out some of this stuff, but in the end of the day, it's got to be yours, right? Like, Vern does it this way, and then I can take what Vern does and I can add a little salt and pepper to it, and maybe this is how this works for me. And I think for me, over those years, that's where I've had success, is that I've just put a lot of time and commitment, both in the gym and then preparing to go into the gym, and the studying piece and the planning and the preparation, and then as well as my ability to make relationships and connections with people, put that together, and that's allowed me to just have a lot of buy-in and success, within this kind of strength and conditioning field.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about watching the player and dissecting the movements and stuff like that. I've been watching swimming. I've been reading Vern's book and trying to figure out. I'm like, as I'm watching breaking the body movement, and then of course I went to your Instagram. You can plug your Instagram if you want right now. And I watched the exercises that you're doing. I not only watched them. We have a gym downstairs. I started doing them, and the movement totally foreign to what I've been used to. And I was expecting to have some injuries afterwards. 0 injuries. But I can tell you they're exhausting, and I'm not doing them with a lot of weight either. And I'm watching your kids on there. I'll tell you the ones that I've been doing. It's just the 1 foot push up, and then with the plate rotate around your head, and then back. I've tried that one. I've done some just seated on the ground. I think your Instagram has your son on it maybe, and he's in a hockey bench and he's kind of standing up. I started doing all those ones myself, and they are hard. I mean, so it's not like it's you go into the work and it's easy, but you're operating on a different, entirely different methodology now.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of that stuff comes from a guy by the name of Franz Bosch, who was again introduced me through Vern, and he took me down. He'd be a great person for you to kind of look into, and it's like reading a different language, to the point like this guy is probably the smartest individual and probably at times struggles to simplify what he does, but like I've been able to kind of take things that work for me. And again, to me, it's like when I get the athlete in the gym, I look at it as a lot. I call teasing the movement, right? And that for example, when hockey players come into the gym, their hips are all crazy rotated in, right? So they're like, when they run, it looks like a helicopter, ready to take off. Their hips are rotating. That low back is rotating with the hips. Everything's stuck together. So all their rotations happening through their low spine, or their lumbar spine. Their T-spine's usually in a crazy amount of flexion because of the way that they're taught to skate upright without the proper mobility to actually do that. And so they got this their backs are messes, their shoulder and their posture's a mess, their hips are a mess. And so I'm like, okay, well, I get this guy in, and then their coaches say, well, I need them to get bigger, stronger, faster. Well, I'm like, to me, loading that person up is the equivalent to like throwing, a ton of rocks in the back of a shitty old pickup truck, right? Eventually, you may get out of the parking lot, but the wheels are going to fall off as soon as they get on the highway, right? So what I want to do is how can I bring them into the gym, build strength, but start to open things up and get them moving the way they need to, right? So first of separating upper and lower body movement, right? So, the exercise you talk about with the halo, with the plate going around the head, right? So giving the body a distraction where it's got to focus on completing an upward rotation, and the low body's got to stay stable, right? Because you'll see the first time people do that, everyone's body wants to move together, and you're just stuck in like this, pretzel. But now they've got a problem to solve, right? And the body is far more brilliant than we give it credit for, right? And I believe that in the right context, the body can self-organize some of these these issues, right? And so this is where those movements got to start really unloaded and lightweight. But I give an exercise like that, I'm like, okay, like I want you to do a single leg eccentric squat while taking this plate and creating a big circle around your head like a halo. And like they get so frustrated and they throw the plate. But then all of a sudden they start to realize, okay, I've got to stabilize through here, and now the hip has got to work, and then I've got to stack my hip over top my knee, over top my ankle, and as well as be stable up top. And now then I got to start to create rotation with being stable down low at the same time. And that's what sports are, right? Especially on hockey, I'm stacked position, and then I got to rotate back and get a pass, and then I got to rotate while shooting, while keeping my hips in somewhat of a square strength, strong position, right? And so And again, we still do some standard strength stuff, and we still have to, there's those things happen, right? Like we still deadlift, and we still do dumbbell bench press, and there's certain things that we don't do that are just, in my opinion, like bench press is not an exercise that's really done much for us. And I just think from a bang for your buck perspective and what I'm trying to do, doesn't really offer a lot of value. But we still build strength. But what I say is, the traditional strength stuff is the bun to the sandwich, right? And the toppings that we put in, the meat, is all the other stuff that really makes that sandwich worthwhile eating, and it's what connects everything, or it's the mortar and the bricks, because, you may have all this power, and this is the problem we have right now, is everyone's all into this French contrast, triphasic type training, which, again, there's nothing wrong with it. We do components of that, but they're not teaching these kids how to actually move properly and how to actually know how movement should feel, and being able to be adaptable within that movement. You look at athletes like Bo Jackson, how adaptable they were, and obviously he suffered some major career-ending injuries, but like just one of the greatest athletes ever to play, I think, ever to walk the planet. And there's a lot of other athletes through that I think a lot of the things that they learned came outside of the gym, right? They came in the schoolyard, of playing games of tag and hide and go seek, or playing wall ball, or how far can I throw this rock, or and different things like that brought out these levels of athleticism that wouldn't be brought out otherwise. And I think that's something that our kids right now are missing in this specialized market, is that we've got this reverse upside down pyramid where they're building skill first and athleticism second. And for me, it should be the opposite. It's build athleticism first, and then you stack skill on later. Because the bigger the basin of athleticism that we build, the more opportunity we have to expand skill and build on that later on, right? And so, that's something that we really look at, is how can we build better athletes, better movers, and the strength will come. And I trained a guy like Mitch Marner. When he was drafted, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the strength staff that was there at the time was like, he's got to get stronger. I'm like, this guy sees the ice better than anybody I've ever seen before. Like he can do things with the puck that a handful of people in this world can do. So you're telling me that him having an extra 10 pounds on his body is going to make him that much better at that? I'm going to try to rush this process. This guy didn't even have facial hair till a year ago, right? So like, we're going to just stack 400 pounds on his back, and again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I just didn't see the value. I was like, I'm going to let this guy's body finish developing the way it needs to finish. And right now we are going to focus on allowing him to be evasive, adaptable, available, right? And to just be able to do the things that make him special at a really high level. And, I think in the span of, his career has been 5 years now, and in that span he's missed, 15 games in the NHL, coming in the NHL is 150 pounds, now weighs 178 pounds, and plays some of the highest minutes and some of the toughest minutes in hockey right now. To me, that says something, right? Whereas if I've seen more athletes die under the bar by trying to chase numbers that, like, he's got to squat this, he's got to jump this high, he's got to run this fast, he's got to complete this conditioning test. And that's great. So they hit all these conditioning and strength numbers that all their strength coaches and other coaches set out for them. And then they get into training camp and their back hurts and their knees hurt and they end up, pulling a hamstring, straining something or end up having, a structural injury that takes them out for 6 months. So what were we training for here? Were we training for the test, or were we training for performance? And this is where strength coaches really struggle, I think, to see kind of the forest between the trees, or I'm not sure where that saying goes, trees between the forest, whatever it is.
You're good.
But to see what the actual goal is, right? Yeah. And I think my sports background and having to work at the Hill and kind of be a little bit of a hybrid sports coach and a strength coach, and allowed me to kind of have, like, when I was in university, I could squat 600 pounds, I could bench press, almost 400 pounds. Like, I was strong as you could be. I was too slow to play in the CFL. I was injured all the time. My body felt like shit. I couldn't lift my arms up over my head, but I tested through the roof every training camp. Mm-hmm. And then I would go out there and I'd have these guys that couldn't do half of what I could do in the gym, and they were dominating on the field. So you tell me who was right. You know what I mean? Like, but I think the strength coaches have this theory. It's like, well, imagine if you took that skill and they were 20 pounds heavier and 0.5 seconds faster and this. I was like, okay, but at what cost does that come at? And what does that look like? Because I don't know anybody that's put 10 pounds on in a year that goes out and I'm sure you as a wrestler of knowing where every pound matters, how different that feels, right? Like, but strength coaches, especially the ones that never played a sport, all they care is I did my job. I got you stronger. I'm like, he also missed 15 games this year, right? Or he lost every match or didn't do this. I'm like, did you do your job, right? Or did you just not understand the question that was being asked or the problem that was in front of you? So, and this is a very contentious thing amongst my world. I'm an outlier in this. But I just think we can impact performance. I think we can make people better. I think we can make people more robust and resilient. But we have to put the time in. It takes, for example, my athletes, our sessions take 2 hours, sometimes 2.5 hours. It takes a lot of time. You want to see a strength conditioning session, typical, an hour, right? It's like, we got, I've got an athlete right now that's in my gym, and he's been with me for a long time, and his team had asked him, he got drafted to an NHL team, and I won't say which it was, but they thought that my training was too movement-based or that it wasn't going to prepare him for the physicality of the NHL. Meanwhile, I've got these guys that have trained with me for 10 plus years that are playing at the highest level and Stanley Cup winners and, have missed lesser games than almost anybody else in the league. But they're like, no, he needs to train like a football player. I'm like, well, funny enough, I train 2 of the top CFL players as well right now, and they're doing pretty good, and they train similar to this as well too, and they also haven't missed a game in the last X amount of years. So, but I kind of said, okay, you do your thing, and this guy comes and I try to help him manage this, but they've got him doing 6 to 8 sets of bench press every day. They've got him doing bicep curls, and they've got and I'm not talking just 2 sets, 3 sets of bicep curls. I'm talking 5, 6 sets of bicep curls, and I'm like, this is but in their minds, well, we'll just train speed and conditioning, 2 weeks before you go to camp. It doesn't work like that, right? Like, it's equivalent to cramming for an exam. I may be able to cram, it may be able to get me through it, but is it going to get me the results that I actually need? Am I actually learning it? And so, but their mind is like, well, he just needs to get bigger and stronger, and then he'll be better. I'm like, okay, well, he gets bigger and stronger, I hope that works. I want to see him succeed, but I worry at what cost. And I hate that term orthopedic cost because I don't agree with it. But at what cost of their body? What the toll of on your shoulders of doing that much bench press and lifting that much weight, and again, but teams really only care about how much can we get out of you in this short period of time, and that's the easiest way to it, right? So it's the same reason why we have a painkiller problem right now in professional sports. Well, it's like this injury really takes 6 to 8 weeks, but if I give you this shot of Toradol, you can play right now. And this is the dark side of sports where people don't want to acknowledge that they don't really care about your long-term wellness for the most part. There is a lot of good people in pro sports, but at the end of the day, pro sports is about what can you do for me right now, and how can we get you to your best as quick as possible to be able to perform for this team and be the player we need you to be right now. They talk about mental health, they talk about physical, well-being, but those things are all secondary to winning. And I get it, it's a business, right? But I think that you can do the same in a way that creates sustainability and long-term enhanced performance.
I think you said it's sustainability. Just reading Vern's book right now, where he's talking about, everybody wants those results right away. But it's a process. You're gonna see the results, but you're not gonna see it as fast as you want it. Yeah. And I think at the business level, it becomes a little bit of greedy. I want this product to perform, and that's what some of these kids are, products to them, unfortunately. It's crazy.
No, absolutely. I think that's it. They're transactions, right? And even like, I work in the private sector, and sometimes that can be contentious of like, I have my own gym, and there's a lot of people on my side that will just chase dollars and sell bullshit and flash and other stuff. And I get the bad reputation that the private side of performance training gets. But really, both the team side and the private side both have their skeletons in their closet, what they hide. And to me, I think I try to be very cognizant of not saying whether it's one way of training is right or wrong, or one person is right or wrong. To me, every person is different, and it's my job to take the time to ask the right questions and dig deep enough where I can figure out what this person needs. Because sometimes there is times where people need more traditional strength type stuff. But at the same time too, it's like, I look at, if you can't, like, I had an athlete in today for the first time, and he is like considered one of the top 16-year-olds in his age group. Can't do a single leg squat, can't stand on one leg. And I was like, but he comes from this Olympic lifting background. He's big and strong, and he moves like shit. I'm like, hey man, you can't do this at 16 years old, and you're moving like shit at 16 years old. I don't care how much you can snatch overhead or how much you can clean. Your body is going to be broken by the time you're 20. Like it's like, I can just see it. Like it's, and because, again, there's that lack of athleticism, right? Like at a young age, where I take some of my other guys where I was like, it can't, like, and I have my own like athleticism assessment where I was like, put guys through, can you do a somersault? Can you do a roll? Can you do some sort of handstand? Can you crawl? Can you jump on 2 feet to land on 1 foot? Can you throw with your wrong hand? Can you run backwards? Can you shuffle without crossing your feet over? All of those things. Of like, I find that the most effective athletes, some of the best players, can do those things fairly easy with fairly minimal coaching. The ones that really struggle to do that are the ones that, again, this is anecdotal, tend to be injured more often than the others. Move a little bit more robotic, and again, to me, it's the movement is medicine, right? Like, and it's if you can do a somersault and then stand up on a single leg from that, I guarantee you I can teach you to squat, your body weight times whatever in days. You know what I mean? Rather than saying that, like, I can't, this guy take a 25-year-old that's all he's done is two-legged training, strength training, trying to teach them single leg squat. Yeah, it's way harder, so.
I did that one where you roll back and then come up.
Yeah.
It's harder than it actually looks.
It's harder than it looks,
it's pretty cool.
And so anyway, and again, it's not magic, it's not a secret formula, but I just, to me, it's strength will come in time. But at the base of it, we need to prepare these guys that they can compete and play. And we still push them, right? Like, conditioning and speed, those are things those are pillars to our, what we do, right? And but I think I look at MMA and jiu-jitsu and things like that, right? Like, how do you get good at jiu-jitsu? Well, you do jiu-jitsu. You don't get better at wrestling like without wrestling, and that's how your conditioning is developed. And obviously there's things that support that, but in the day, like, there's a reason why the best wrestlers are the best wrestlers, and that's where they spend their time doing. And how can we support that type of activity from a strength and conditioning standpoint is very different than just doing back squats and Olympic lifting and power, and that can be a part of it, but it can't be the main piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I listening to you talk here, and in my practices, I just coach young kids. I'm done with the universities, but I got young kids, and doing somersaults have become problematic for them. We have to reteach them how to do these things, and the shuffling from side to side. I've actually seen some of your exercises where I've said to myself, I'm going to implement those in our practice. Not the hard ones, because I tried some of the hard ones, but just the little ones, the movements that I think will benefit them in the long run. I think you hit on it earlier about the play time and everything. You've got to build a foundation of mobility and functionality first, and then build on the strength. One thing before we're going to go, what would be an exercise for a young aspiring 12-year-old football player, what would you suggest that individual do? Or any kid that age. Doesn't have to be football.
I think for me, like when I training kids that young, especially my own son, it's one about trying not to make it so robotic, right? Coordination, I think, is massive, right? So being able to, I always say, walk and chew gum, right? So can you jump and catch at the same time? Can you run and catch? Can you shuffle and throw? Can you do two movements at once with some sort of effective outcome? But I think from a basic, if we just look at basic strength, I think, learning to squat properly, I think, is really important, and that could just be a body weight squat. That could be a split squat. And I think climbing a rope, I'm a big fan of climbing.
I got my homework.
Yeah. And I think crawling, right? I think any sort of gymnastics, and I love jiu-jitsu for kids. I think that's the more comfortable kids come with the ground and learn to navigate that, right? Like our kids don't fall anymore, and I think there's a reason why we've seen such a rise in broken wrists and separated shoulders and and knee injuries is because our kids don't fall. Like, we protect them so much. I think that piece about learning to wrestle, learning to manage force, right? That's on my body, right? So tug of war, things like that, I think have an extensive value. But, when I train kids, it'll be 35 minutes. We work on sprinting, we work on squatting, but squatting, stacking your joints very slow and, controlled and low volume. So maybe 3 reps, but with a 3-second eccentric down of just, again, stacking joints, learning to stack the joints. And it's not an eccentric protocol or anything like that. It's just, again, letting them feel the movement, right? And where they should feel it.
Yeah.
Hanging, climbing. I think the rise in shoulder injuries is kids aren't climbing monkey bars. They're not trying to, have, who can throw the ball the farthest, right? Like, I see these baseball programs that are training all year round now, and everything is controlled and mechanical, and instead of just like kids going out and throwing with tennis balls, throwing footballs, throwing wiffle balls, throwing water balloons, like all of those things, like there needs to be variety and variability, and I think there needs to be breaks in their training within that period, so but I think, again, to come back to you, I don't want to go too general on this because the youth sports topic I can get pretty deep on, but I think if I'm 12, if I'm a parent of a 12-year-old, I'm 12, I'm sprinting, I'm jumping, I'm climbing, and I'm throwing. Those are the things that I'm doing, and I'm trying to do with maximal force and intent, because, again, power and speed and the acceleration, it's like, if you're just doing a bunch of slow bullshit at a young age, and this is why I hate, like, half these parents, like, everyone's like, what does your kid do? I'm like, he trains in the backyard. He goes out, he gets 4 things, he does them. But at the end of the day, my son, who's a pretty fit kid, is out playing all the time. Yeah. And that's what kids need. Kids need time to play and explore. And these kids that even come into my gym, like, half time, they have no free time. Yeah, they have no free time, and they have no breaks. And even when they breaks, they're doing strength conditioning, or then they're doing a skill session or skating sets. Kids need time to be kids. They need time to be bored. They need time to explore. And that's the stuff, to me, that's going to drive not only their physical success, but also their mental and emotional success, because there's time to miss things. There's time to appreciate other facets of life, and time to grow, for your passion to grow for your sport. Because if you're going 100 miles an hour all the time at 12, it's going to be really difficult to do it at 21. And so it's like, it's our job as parents and coaches, I think, at times, to manage passion. Like, I hear all the time my parents say, my kid loves it, he loves it. It's great, I don't doubt that. I love ice cream. Yeah, I can't eat ice cream every day. You know what I mean? Like, and so it's our job to manage that and manage the exposure piece. And I know a sport like your daughter does, swimming is different, and that those things where it's like you're managing a year-round beast, and same as figure skating and some of those Olympic sports, and those sports are different than team sports too, right? Like, because you peak earlier, there's different windows of training, but in the end of the day, I think breaks and variability are key. And variability doesn't mean play different sports. it could mean just train differently at times, right? Or surround yourself with different methods of training. And to get good at swimming, you don't have to swim all year round. You can do other things that will equivalent to that and transfer over. Just as throwing a baseball hard, you don't have to just throw a baseball all the time. You can throw a med ball. You can learn to do a proper push-up and other things that will translate, to increasing velocity without ever touching a baseball for 3 months. But yeah, that would be my. I gave you a little bit.
Hey,
of a
no,
wide run, but
that's why you're here.
Yeah.
We want you to talk. We want you to unleash some of this information.
Yeah.
It's, I'm sure if we opened up that head of yours, we find out more. But I don't want to take too much more of your time. What I'd like to do is maybe possibly do another podcast with you. Maybe come down to your gym and set up when we could chat in there. Maybe it's I don't know if it's if that's too intrusive, but maybe we could do something like that. Because it sounds like I've got a whole bunch more questions, but I'm not going to actually ask them because, again, your time is more valuable than what we're doing right now.
No, listen, you're welcome anytime. I'd love that, and I appreciate these conversations. And listen, I think I love what you're doing, and I did a kind of quick little research on you and passions in your journey, and I just think it's. World needs more people like yourself in trying to make difference and also using sports as a platform. And I think it's really cool how, as a police officer and what you're doing and how you've been able to tie your passion for sports and coaching and the rules. I think I say to all people, I was like, it's up to us to ninja life, right? Like you can make, it's like, because I've got buddies that, I wish I could do what you do or do a job that I love. I was like, you can change your lifestyle, whether you're a banker, whether you're a finance guy or whatever you are, right? Firefighter, like we can find ways to meld our passions, right?
Yeah.
And in the end of the day, it's just about impacting people, right? And being passionate about what we're doing. And it's what I say to my kids every day. It's like, like you can always have an opportunity to make somebody's life better, and every time you show up somewhere, right? And it's our choice whether we want to make someone's life better, or we can be forgettable, or we can just, be a pain in the ass, and we'll get to choose every day. So make that choice to try to make someone's life a little bit better and also to be learning and getting ourselves better at the same time. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, going back to that, making people better.
Yeah. That's
Awesome. Dan, thank you so much.
Appreciate
your time. Thank you for tuning in to the Conceive, Believe, and Achieve podcast. I hope you found today's episode insightful and inspiring. Your support means the world to us, so don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and leave a comment in the section below. Your feedback fuels our journey to bring you more valuable content and stories from the realm of sports. Until next time, keep pushing boundaries, believing in yourself, and achieving greatness. Thank you for listening.